Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today I want to talk about kind of the state of the overall crypto market. Now that we've seen the market kind of, recover-ish a little bit maybe from that pullback that we saw, I want to talk a little bit about kind of what are we seeing? What's next? Is alt season canceled? Is it delayed? I think it's delayed. We're going to go over a whole bunch of different things as to why I'm thinking that. We'll go over a whole bunch of data, all that type of stuff. Of course, you can, obviously review this data and kind of come to your own conclusion. Nothing that I say is financial advice, but I do think I've got some pretty good reasoning here today. So stay tuned and we'll see what we can go over. And I'd love for your thoughts, comments, input, all that type of stuff on what we end up going through today. So without further ado, let's go ahead. We'll dive right into crypto bubbles. We can see a green day on the market technically, but I would say it's a pretty mixed day. Kind of lots down, some things up, kind of a pretty split market here and there. So I wouldn't say we really have one direction on the market or the other. If we do look at the weekly, everything's still very, very red. So if we do have a direction on the market, clearly to the downside, but at least as of right now, a lot of the bleeding, I would say, has kind of stopped. We're kind of sitting at more of like a low volatility, low volume kind of consolidationary type of period, at least from what it looks like on most of the charts that I'm seeing. So we'll check out the Bitcoin chart and probably the Ethereum chart specifically. But what we can see is on the total two, first, is we did break out of this lower liquidity zone. Like I was forecasting could be, potentially a little bit of a rough thing. So far, we have settled kind of on this like 618 fib line. We could also see there was a little bit of support here kind of on the like larger total 2 market cap. Again, for anybody who doesn't know, total 2 is basically the total market cap of crypto excluding Bitcoin. So we can see obviously, a pretty decent move to the downside, breaking outside of this wedge, as well as breaking outside of this support that had held up for quite a while at this point in time. So obviously not breaking too far below it, but the overall alt market not looking to be in a particularly great spot. And so I think kind of what we're seeing right now is very likely a possibility that alt season is going to be delayed. There's a couple of different reasons why I think that. We've got some data to back this up. Obviously, I have no idea for sure if we start to kind of, cope or adjust to the fact that we could be seeing a delayed alt season. Maybe that's exactly the reason why we see a really early run, because people stop expecting it, right? Obviously, I hammer this constantly, but things don't happen because people expect it. Things happen because people don't expect it, is kind of my belief on what we view happening kind of within the market overall. And so obviously, as we can see, still down pretty bad for altcoins. We have kind of fallen out of a lot of the structure that we had been forming that was looking relatively bullish. So now we got to kind of wait for some new structure to form. We are kind of sitting up on this level of support here though. So not the end of the world. We could maybe potentially still be kind of following this just like overall descending trend line. And maybe this even comes into more of like a descending channel rather than a wedge. That's always a possibility. So moving on though, I did want to just take a super quick look at the market overview, just to kind of get a quick glance of where we're at. Open interest remaining pretty high on Bitcoin, which is a good thing. Liquidation map, very, very low in terms of volume. I think this is just because so many people have been completely wiped out. More on that here in a second. We can see here, obviously some decent volume to the upside in terms of liquidating shorts, but on the downside, still kind of recovering. I think a lot of people are kind of still licking their wounds from those mass liquidation events that we saw. We can see fear and greed here in neutral. Kind of a little bit of some bizarre movement happening over the past couple days. It wasn't greed, then it went like almost back to fear, then it went back to greed, and now we're back in neutral again. So, kind of whipsawing around in this like neutral to greed area, and even kind of the high end of fear. If we do look at the RSI heat map, we can also see the market's still down pretty bad. Obviously, we've seen some bounces here and there, kind of in some isolated parts of the market, but overall, the market average is just barely above oversold, sitting in weak. As we can see, tons and tons and tons of oversold coins here, which is pretty interesting because if you do look at the crypto chart, for Bitcoin at least, it's hovering near all-time highs. Obviously, there's a lot of alts that are not doing particularly well. But I would say in the grand scheme of things, there are also a lot of alts that are doing particularly well. So, the market, I would say overall, is in a pretty healthy place. And another thing that I wanted to show you today is the liquidations over the past 24 hours. We can see 180 million liquidated in the past 24 hours. And I'm not showing you this because of how noteworthy it is, but because of how unnoteworthy it is, right? Really pretty small volume compared to what we've seen over the past 3 or 4 days. We could see falling by another further 50% over yesterday, and I think the day before that was like another 50%. The day before that was like another 75%. So we're definitely seeing a bunch of leverage flushed from the market here. Not really much going on in either direction of the market, which I do think is good. Seeing that leverage flushed from the market, in my opinion, is a good thing. And this is, in my opinion, one of the reasons why I do think we could still see an alt season and why it has maybe been delayed. Because usually you don't see like a catastrophic collapse happen without a ton of leverage wound up in the market. And if all of this is being kind of routinely wiped from the market, then it's going to make it really, really hard for us to kind of get over leveraged and see some sort of spectacular crash. And frankly, like if we continue to see these types of things happen, maybe we just don't see a crash. But also with the caveat that we're probably not going to see any sort of like ridiculous run to the upside either. You can't kind of really have one without the other. You kind of, you need both. So if we don't see one, we're probably not going to see the other, again, in my opinion. Now, as we're going through, starting to look at some of these charts and things like that, if you are interested in starting to trade, I do have that link to BTCC in the description below. They are doing that 10% bonus on first-time deposits, so it's a really, really good deal. They also are doing extra bonuses of up to $10,055 per user, so they're throwing a whole bunch of money at you to go on ahead and start trading with them if that is something that you're interested in. Also, no VPN or KYC necessary. Again, of course, if that's something that is worthwhile to you, really, really good deal here. So if this is something that you are wanting to look into a little bit further, like I said, just got it in the link in the description below. It doesn't cost you anything, nothing like that. So check it out if you are interested. Here we'll go to BTCC. You can see I do a lot of my charting here. We will look at Bitcoin specifically. And what we can see off Bitcoin is a little bit of what I was talking about earlier, right? I mean, sentiment I would say is generally pretty bad. We can see the market's coming back to neutral. It wasn't greed, but like look at where we're at for Bitcoin. I mean, it's holding really, really well compared to like what we've seen over the past year or so. I mean, if we go back, this is actually something I was doing on my live stream earlier today, so I'll delete some of this just to clean up the chart a little bit. But we can see, holding very, very nicely. This does not look like the bull run is over. At least, obviously we could see a structure break and seeing some movements to the downside here. But this does not look like we are in a bear market, in my opinion. I mean, I think it's pretty clear to see. Does not appear that way, right? And so now, of course, how long we sit here and see this type of consolidation happening, whether we break out of this to the downside and potentially enter a bear market, all hard to say. But right now, I mean, what we're seeing, in my opinion, is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. And if we zoom in really, really closely, we can see a couple of different things. The main thing here being that we kind of were pushing the bottom of this Bollinger Band here, and we have now started to kind of come back up a little bit into it. We may see a little bit of resistance up at this point just because this historically has been a little bit of a liquidity zone. If we look back, we can see kind of a whole bunch of wicks reaching into this level from both the top side and the bottom side. So, potentially a little bit of resistance coming our way for Bitcoin. There's been a lot of consolidation happening, volume coming down, of course, a little bit, but mostly it's just, a pretty like consolidation type of phase. This is like a accumulation or potentially a distribution type of phase. Where we go from here kind of depends on, I think, if we break below this or above this. Obviously, we've broken above this several different times, but only wicks, no real like sustained break. So I think we would need to see kind of a sustained break around out of this like kind of like low 100,000 range. One thing that I also have been hearing more about recently, and I think this is kind of interesting because it resembles an overall like sentiment type of change, is that there's more people talking, I would say, somewhat favorably about Ethereum, which I do find quite interesting. So we're going to talk about Ethereum a little bit today. If we do look at kind of how they performed over the past year or so, you can see this is the start of 2024. We actually wicked down to a price lower than where we started in 2024, which is pretty wild if you ask me. That would have not been on my bingo card, particularly if we saw Bitcoin, over 2x the price of where it started. So, pretty interesting there. We have seen it range pretty hard, I would say, kind of but from this like low 2000s to the low 4000s, basically. Never really being able to break too far above 4,000. I think the all-time high that we saw here, was like 4,100. I think that's all-time high. If it's not all-time high, it's pretty close. But we just haven't really been able to get over that point. We've seen, 1, 2, 3, and maybe 4. This maybe like 3.5 different points at which we kind of ran up to that. So, definitely a really strong resistance coming in. Probably kind of at around like this range. This level is proving to be a little bit of a difficulty there. And then here kind of at the bottom side, probably somewhere around here-ish. Again, kind of some wicks here and there, but this kind of is, I would say, roughly where it's going to be, maybe even a little bit further down. Something kind of like that is what I would say. We've pretty much just been range bound between this for the past year or so. So, not a whole bunch of, super exciting movement going on here. But overall, I would say that the sentiment around Ethereum has been pretty bad, just generally. I am seeing that's kind of starting to change, at least from like what I've been seeing on Twitter and Discord and all these various different places. Who knows? We'll have to see kind of what happens there. But overall, I do think we will have some pretty strong moves from Ethereum. again, who knows for sure. I think at this point, this is just more of a gut feeling, just because I do, there's a bunch of money in Ethereum. I think there's a lot of like Ethereum fans generally. And so I do think that we will probably see some moves from Ethereum this year. If we don't see some moves from Ethereum this year, I will be pretty bearish on Ethereum. I think if it doesn't move this year, I think it would be cause for some concern. So anyway, that's kind of what we're looking at. Like I said, got the link in the description below. If you are wanting to trade Bitcoin, Ethereum, Sui, Solana, Cardano, XRP, anything like that, just feel free to go ahead, check that out in the description below. Now, one thing that I wanted to kind of go into a little bit more was how we talked about how I think the alt season is probably delayed but not canceled. That's kind of the general sense I get out of it. I've got kind of two things here that I think show a little bit of that. We've got some other data points, but just in the sake of brevity, I'm going to kind of stick with a couple things here. So first off, we've got the Bitcoin halving progress. As we can see historically, we would have already seen that kind of the first major leg up if we were in like a 2013 bull run. If we were in the 2017 bull run, we wouldn't have really seen too much of the gains. I think we're kind of mirroring 2017 most closely, at least at this point. If we look at 2019, or I guess 2021, basically all of the gains had been had at this point in time. So if we're mirroring 2021, then we probably are at a top or very close to a top, and I think that's why so many people are kind of calling for the end of the bull run. But again, if you lack the ability to look prior or like past one cycle, then I don't know what to tell you. We've seen substantial gains to the upside, particularly in 2017 after this point in the halving. And again, we've also seen it here in 2013 as well. That said, 2013, kind of had a double run, which is really cool. Each of these kind of really only having one run. So, who's to say for sure exactly what's going to happen here? But just based on what we're seeing, we've kind of seen a trend to the upside and things have been looking good. Granted, it is somewhat easy to see that the bull run started, I would say, a little bit earlier, or I guess you could say a little bit later in the previous cycle, because usually, we see here, I guess a little bit of run starts here, but it kind of, goes up and then kind of bounces around a little bit. This one, I guess, kind of starts around here and starts going. So I guess, this is about looking similar to what we've seen in the past, except with the exception of 2019. This was kind of like the DeFi summer phase. And so I think, this was a little bit of an aberration here. But overall, I think it's fairly clear to see that, potentially we're mirroring 2017 closer than maybe any other previous cycle. Of course, if we are going to continue to see a move to the upside, there is always the possibility that this cycle could be wholly different in the fact that we just kind of go down from here and maybe even just kind of range. That would be very different from what we've seen here in the past. So hard to say for sure of exactly what's going to happen. This time could be different, could be similar to one of them, could be similar to all of them. Who's to say for sure? But one thing that kind of adds to my conviction that we are still going to see this type of situation, maybe not to this degree, right? But this type of situation generally, is some of the things that I have been posting on my X account. I have been trying to make a more concentrated effort to post like actual, real, good, valuable content on my X account, just because it's a little bit more of like a kind of a short and quick way to get some of my thoughts out and collect some of the things that I'm seeing in the market that ultimately I am kind of using in some degree as kind of a basis for some of my theories in the video. And so we can see here, a whole bunch. The reason I'm referring to my Twitter here is because there's a whole bunch of, in my opinion, really bullish things going on that I didn't just want to focus on any one in particular. So of course we can see here, Elon Musk supports putting US Treasury transactions on the blockchain for full transparency. I think that makes a ton of sense. Obviously would be majorly bullish for just crypto and blockchain adoption in general. This would be huge to see. We can also see here, SEC reduces crypto enforcement efforts, reassigning over 50 lawyers working on cryptocurrency cases. Another great thing to see. It looks like we are probably finally seeing the end of the regulation by enforcement type of action, which is fantastic. We can also see here, this is a comment from David Sachs talking about how we could potentially, again, no definitive answers here, but potentially be seeing Bitcoin in a sovereign reserve. Here's something, we've kind of already been over fear and greed, so we'll kind of skip that. But then we see something else here talking about the like sovereign wealth fund and also potentially like a crypto asset stash, as we've talked about before as well. So a lot of really, in my opinion, fundamentally bullish things going on here. Also have a little bit on XRP as well. So a lot of really, really interesting things going on here. I think there is one other kind of piece of data that we could potentially refer to, and that is essentially kind of looking at how we're seeing Bitcoin dominance continue to rise. We thought we saw Bitcoin dominance top at 60%, but it's actually kind of gone even higher from there. I think it's kind of pulled back a little bit, but in some of this liquidation stuff that we saw earlier on in the week, Bitcoin dominance really, really rocketed. And so, that's something that we also could kind of point to as well of, well, potentially Bitcoin's not done, and, potentially it's still Bitcoin season, and we're going to have to wait a little while for altcoin season. Again, following previous cycles, we need to see Bitcoin top, then we need to see kind of some of the bigs top, Ethereum, Solana, XRP, Cardano, like top 10 to 15-ish types of coins, I would say. Primarily top 10s though. And then from there, you kind of, work the way down to maybe the top 25, top 50, top 100, down and down and down, all the way we go until we're in full-blown like degen altcoin season, right? So again, no guarantees in life that this is actually going to happen, but that's typically how it's happened in the past. We haven't really seen any of those like major gains out of Bitcoin that kind of starts that trickle down into kind of the next asset. The key thing that people need to remember is it's not just a Bitcoin top, but it's a Bitcoin top that's like somewhat inspiring, right? Because if people are only making, a handful of bucks off of Bitcoin, they're not going to be like, oh my gosh, where's the next one? Because it wasn't really that exciting to begin with anyway. And so that's kind of my thought here, that maybe some people are missing is not only do we need to see some tops out of these things, but we need to see some like really inspiring gains. Think about like some of the gains that Solana's seen so far. That to me, like if Solana had a bigger market cap, that would have kind of really kicked the market in action. And honestly, like it kind of did. Like Solana kind of had its own alt season already because of the gains that kind of came out on there. So that's just something to consider, something to think about. Hopefully you did find the information in this video useful. If you did, please do give me a like and a subscribe, because it really, really does help me out. Also, I do have that exchange link in the description below if you are looking for a place to trade. And then also, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, thoughts, anything like that, just feel free to drop those in the comment section below. I do try to read and respond to all of my comments. So if you have anything that you want me to see, that'd be a great way to do it. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.